Thank you.
You know, after the film came out, after Julieta came out, I got calls from many friends who saw it and who stayed at the very end of the film and read the credits. And so they saw my name and they called me up and they said, "God, it was a wonderful score. You know, I heard Takemitsu, I heard Bernard Herrmann, I heard, Debussy." And so I said, well, you know, I was at the sessions and none of those people were present, but I wanted to know, who are your musical heroes? Who, you know, if anybody, do you find a big influence?
In front of my desk, I have this photograph being together Debussy and Stravinsky. And I think they have been always a kind of light on my life. I admire so much their music. Takemitsu also is a very inspiring composer in my life.
Like you, not only a concert composer, but many films as well.
Yeah, he did a lot of films, and he really loved the film music. And I think, I read about his life writing for films, and he didn't have a different relationship with the music when he was writing for the concert hall or for the film music, but it was his love for music, and everything was completely integrated.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, he was he's a wonderful composer, and it reminded me a lot of some cues in that and several other of your films, because you write for the concert hall as well, don't you?
Yes, not so much as I would like to do, but I'm doing more and more. And sometimes I feel that I don't need the images to write without any obligation. At the same time, when I write without any obligation, I always find the obligation. I found that you can't do whatever. You also the precision of the phrase, of the shape is guiding you to the end.
Even when it's purely a musical piece.
Yeah.
Because a lot of film composers, once they, make a career, most of their days are taken up with all of the requirements for writing for film, and writing for a specific character, and always letting the film tell the story rather than their own music tell the story. So it's interesting that once you have the responsibility to maintain the narrative, to tell the story in music, that you want to pursue that.
Yeah, when writing for films, and especially working with Almodóvar, the music has to be really a part of the narrative and a kind of other actor or other voice. For example, in Julieta, there is the voice of the actors telling the story all the time, and the music is completely coming from the voice. The first thing I did was to listen to the voice, even not watching the film, but listen to the voice. And I think there is the cadence of the voice guided my first writings on the music.
The actual voices of the actors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But sometimes I didn't find any difference writing for films or not for the narrative of a film. But there are, of course, many differences about the timing, about how much spend the line to end. And also on films, the music is growing up at the same time you are writing it, is growing up adding a meaning to itself. So something that you wrote, like music, purely music, when you put with images, takes the shape of the character or the space, or it takes a meaning, and that becomes completely connected with the music. So in a moment, I don't know if I'm writing music or words. Is the end of the story is that at the end I'm writing words.
You know, one of the great pleasures I have of working a lot in film is working with composers from all kinds of backgrounds. You know, some come from pop music, some very, you know, classically trained traditionally, some, you know, are electronic musicians. Maybe you could tell us a bit more about your own musical background. You know, how did you train? What are your main influences? And how did you enter into film music? Was that what you always wanted to do?
Well, I my first school was the guitar. I loved to play guitar in my room by night. So I learned the classical Spanish music for guitar, Tárrega, Albéniz, Sor, because the Spanish classical music for guitar is very rich. And immediately I felt the feeling to write. So in a moment I began to imagine music, but I needed help to do that. And I started to study harmony, counterpoint, and the piano. That the piano helped me a lot to especially when I started to study orchestration, because the piano can reduce in a way the incredibly world of the orchestration. And so at the beginning, my idea was to become a composer. I don't know, maybe for the concert halls, but then my brother started to study film. He wanted to be a film director. He came to London, and so he asked me for the first time to do something for him, like it was his exercise. So putting music for very static images. And then after him, his friends began to call me, and then the editor of the friend, and then the friend of the editor of the friend. And so I started, at that time I didn't have any publicist or agent, but it was my friends that introduced me on that art. And at that time in Spain, we didn't have any school about film music, so it has been something that I have learned by doing, by making the music.
And most of this took place in San Sebastian, where you were from?
Yeah, at the beginning was San Sebastian, and very soon I came to Madrid, and the industry was at that moment there. I was very lucky because at that time, for the composers, the classical composers or contemporary composers, they didn't like at all the music for films. They thought that music for films was a kind of second level of composers or life. not very artistic. But for me, it was very important because I had the possibility to write and record the music I had written before, and that was an opportunity to have the connection with the sound, not to write on paper. And at that time we didn't have electronic. Well, I learned electronic, but we didn't have computers, and so
all the digital stuff we have now.
Yeah. So it was for me the very easy connection with music.
And you got to you always were able to work with live musicians then.
Yeah.
Well, this is very important for you, isn't it?
Yeah. And I learned a lot from the musicians, the things that I didn't know really about orchestration, and so my life has been, especially in the studios, working with musicians.
So, well, now you started composing really for films and shorts and features in the early 1980s, about, and now you've composed well over 50 films. When you, I know, San Sebastian, it just occurred to me that one of the directors you had a first sort of ongoing collaboration with was Julio, who was also from San Sebastian.
Yeah.
Did you meet him there?
Yeah, I met him there. He was at that moment, he wrote for a journal, how do you call it, a critic?
Yeah, a newspaper.
Newspaper, yeah. And very influenced by French cinema. And I loved also these films. And my brother was very influenced by Tarkovsky, so I had this invitation to see the films through their eyes. They were experts on that, so they were, and my masters on film, and these things has been repeated with all the directors. So when I came, or when I met Almodóvar, Almodóvar has been my master so I have been hours and hours with him speaking about film. So I'm a very good student.
So you learned from the directors themselves.
Yes, I'm a very lucky man.
Very lucky, yeah. So it seems like a very unique and intimate and very valuable way to start. I'm sure there's more than a few aspiring composers in the audience tonight. How do you think the business has changed, especially for a new composer today?
Well, there's something, I don't know if it's, it's important. For example, I never had with Almodóvar something that we call temp track. That is, when the directors make the first cut, they put music that guides the composer to write his own music. And for example, for this Julieta, Almodóvar came and showed me the film. Well, he showed me the film in a big screen.
Oh, really?
Because he also says that it's very important that my first feeling is with a big screen. Well, in a studio, maybe not so big as this one, but to have the feeling of the measure of things, how they happen in a theater. And but we don't have any. He doesn't know where to put music or where the music. Why the music to exist? Excuse me, my English.
It's okay.
It's okay. So, for example, he came with this film with Julieta. We showed the film, and at that moment, the film was called Silence, and for me, it was terrible. Because I saw the film and I said, well, silence, that's it. You don't need me for that. And the film without music also is very, very interesting, I have to say. I didn't find my place on the film because 2 weeks later he changed the name, and then I started to put the music very close to Julieta, and but we didn't have this temp track, so any message. So I had to really compose from zero, and it's more. It takes more time, and we spent like 4 months to do that, and that in the industry is impossible to. And he comes every Sunday to my house, and I show him the music I have been writing this week. So it's a very like old style.
Very old, yeah.
But I think, well, I don't know. Industry needs speed and other things, but authors need to say the truth, and sometimes it's good to go like a blind.
No preconceptions.
Yeah, no preconceptions.
So you've done, this is your 10th film with Almodóvar.
Yeah.
Is it always been this way? I mean, is your first contact with the film, or sometimes the script, or sometimes just a story, and never a temp track? You probably know what a temp track is. If you don't, it's a device where a director or maybe one of the editors will take music and put it on to the film as a substitute for the real score that's about to be written. It gives the composer a kind of guide. The problem is that the directors and everyone around the film, they fall in love with this temp track and they don't want to get rid of it. And so then they ask a composer and they go, oh, it's not like what we had on this temp track. So it's if you can communicate like this, it's always much better. But is your experience with Almodóvar always been like this? Always quite generous with time? Because that is rare in the business.
Yeah, well, I have had the same experience. For example, with Thomas Alfredson in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. He asked me, "Do you want to watch the film with the temp?" And I say, "Better. I prefer not to." And my answer was, "Well, let me 20 days to write music. If I find the good sound for you, I will follow with the music. If not, you have not to pay me." So it was like also an old style deal. And I think it works because I had to do my best. And but sometimes I'm not want to defend this way to is my way or the way we do, but of course in other productions they need the temp and to do it in 2 weeks, and people in this industry like very much composers doing 1 hour of music in 1 week. It's like very epic thing about composers. And I hate to write so much music in a week.
Well, I want to ask you a bit more about that, but before we do, I'd like to just have a clip played here from The Skin I Live In, which was quite, for me, quite a departure for Almodóvar. His films are quite tragic and quite, emotional, but this one was very, very dark indeed. Was it different for you, that film, from the other films?
Yeah. In some points each film has been completely different. I can't synthesize, but I found an instrument for the film. In the other films, there is not the representation of the drama through an instrument, and here the violin finds, I think, the voice, and through this instrument came the complete the complete sound. Well, as I tell you, each film has a completely different approach.
So
Yeah.
very dramatic.
Very dramatic. Well, actually, this music, I wrote a piece for string trio that is the origin of this piece. And I show this piece to Almodóvar, and this piece was well, I wrote more based on that idea that I had before doing this film, and for me, as a pure music, the violin has this difficult equilibrium.
Equilibrium, yeah.
In a repetitive structure. So it's taking the accents in different parts. So it's for me, the violin suggests the idea to escape from the tyranny of the two other voices. When I wrote for the film, I respect this idea, but I developed the orchestration, and it's not for string trio, but for string chamber orchestra.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a fascinating film, and also the music in this one, like in Julieta, has a very, very high profile. You know, it becomes another character, which I find is quite rare. Quite often these days in a lot of big budget pictures, there's a lot of music, but it sort of serves as, you know, to anesthetize the audience rather than to involve them as a character. Are you? I know you've done more Hollywood films. You know, you've done Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, the ones that have the Oscar nominations. That one, Constant Gardener, and Kite Runner. Was that a really big, a different experience for you working on those films, and also the Ridley Scott film Exodus?
Yeah, it's different when working with authors. The conversation is with the director.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a lot of different people thinking, so it's easier to have this. It's like this conversation, very direct, and also the pressure of the industry is about if we do a film, how sure we are that it's going to be a good deal with the audience, and they do a lot of screening,
focus group and testing,
and
yeah.
So it's a pressure about, and this freedom that Almodóvar has is something that is not very is very an exception in the industry.
Very rare.
And his theatrical approach to the story gives to the music more space, and he likes very much music. So it's
I think it was Fellini who said his favorite bit of the filmmaking process was attending the recording sessions of Nino Rota's music. And you know, I think I'm reminded of that, and the pairing of, you know, Hitchcock and Bernard Herrmann, and this kind of thing where you have two very strong personalities who can work together, but who also have a complete dialogue, because the music can change a film so much. Can you just walk us through? I know he comes to your house every Sunday. What else happens, when you're making a film with him? Do you look at the film and say, do you have long discussions and back and forth?
Yes, a lot. He comes after lunch. We take a tea.
So civilized.
Not a coffee. And so I show him the music, and sometimes it's a conversation. He tell me a lot about, especially when we are starting with the film, he tell me a lot of things about the shooting, about the characters, why she says that, but she doesn't say that. And so I have really a lot of information. Maybe I can't use this information. This information is not to use it, but it's very important to spend 4 months on a film. So, and I show the music. I do mock-ups. Sometimes I play the piano, the music, but I do mock-ups, short pieces of music. Sometimes I go to the studio with a little ensemble or a string quartet, and because there are music that I write for him that I can't traduce it playing at the computer, or because it's about expression, and then he and his company gave me the possibility to make little recordings during the process. It's for that and in many of his films are music for string quartet, because it's my little orchestra, the string quartet. Mm-hmm. And then when I go to make it bigger with a string chamber orchestra, he prefers the string quartet version because he lives for months with this version, and it's very difficult.
So you make your own temp track, actually.
Yeah, yeah. To change the temp track is very difficult. Once I wrote a piece. It was for All About My Mother, and I think it's in the credit titles at the beginning. There is a guitar, and it was a horrible sound of guitar, but I didn't. I did it at the computer. Horrible sample of guitar. I hated this sound, but so we went to. It was at the studio with the big screen, and I told him, listen, the guitar is horrible, but well, it's what I had, and so, and he showed us, oh, the piece is nice, but really the guitar is horrible. And then I went to a big studio. I recorded with the best guitarist, and then I put the music to him, and he said, this guitar is horrible. I prefer your guitar because the other guitar has your own spirit, and this one not. And so it's because the memory is very difficult to change the memory of music. So if you listen to the Ninth Symphony, Beethoven Ninth Symphony, performed by Claudio Abbado, and it's your memory that maybe you can't discover other possibilities of this music if you are completely in love with one. So it's high fidelity.
It is indeed. You know, I want to, speaking of the string trio and string quartet, there's a wonderful bit in our next cue. This is from Talk to Her, the scene where you composed an accompaniment to the silent film.
Yeah.
So we're going to have a little bit of that now, if you could roll that.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen that film, I encourage you to go see it. It's not only wonderful music, but an incredible
Yeah.
work of fantasy there, in particularly that scene. But that is a really extensive, huge cue. I mean, it begins before the silent film and carries on right through it.
Yeah.
And it's rare to have that complexity of music, you know, in any films these days. I know when we were recording Julieta, the musicians are so happy because they're immediately pulled into a complete sound world, you know, that you don't get with many films too often. You know, it's just kind of padding or some kind of atmosphere, which is fine because that's what the director wants. But it's always very clear with Almodóvar that you're creating character and not just sound. Is there a kind of sound world that you always? I know you say it's different every time, but you think Almodóvar, I'm now entering into a different sound world.
Well, I always feel that his films need a line, like very clear the melody. He doesn't like atmospheres, and the atmosphere has to be connected with harmonic movements, because is what I was at the deduction.
Mm-hmm.
I deduced that from. He didn't tell me exactly that, but I realized that the film and he needed the melody. Of course, this thing has varied a lot during years, and we did a lot of things very complex as the violin piece before that is not a very melodic shape, but I think the music I did for him is based on clarity, on the very precise shape. But for example, for this, I was very moved because in a film that is called Hable con ella, Talk to Her, in the middle is a silent film, so it's not talking, it's very, and that means a lot. So I had to use the music as words, and it was a great experience. And at the beginning, I didn't know what to do, and I was listening at that time, or maybe this film connected me to the Schoenberg quartets. And at the beginning of this, exactly this part you have chosen, is a quote of the second string quartet. I use like dum da dum da 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 da, and this part makes the propulsion, so the idea the dynamic idea to follow. But I did like 3 quotations on this part, and for me was good to be connected with music from the past. I feel very good when I'm connected with music from the past.
It's interesting because he obviously has a huge influence, and you have a very close relationship when it comes to developing the music. I was interested that when we recorded Julieta, he wasn't there. Is he happy for the recording process to go on without him being present?
Yes. Well, the problem is that after I have to show him the real music, and sometimes at the beginning in Julieta, the harp is a real harp that you recorded at the studio, and he preferred the harp that I recorded, the sampled harp. So I have to to fight with him about, but listen, is better this sound, or is more real, or it is more really true, or whatever. And but he doesn't like to come to the studio because it's very boring. Yeah, it's so.
It's too boring for him.
Too boring for him.
Is that a good thing for you, though? Then?
It's perfect. I think it's very boring for him, and so it's
so all
perfect.
the work has been done, really. All the discussions have been had, and it's
no. But after, maybe we can also change things and make differences. But really, when we finish, he really loves the music. I think he really loves it was written by him, so he loves completely the music, and so it's for that he puts the music in a good level, and it's like this.
And when you the process of actually recording it, I was curious. I only conducted this score. Alberto usually conducts his own scores, but he had a really bad frozen shoulder. He couldn't, about like that, he could conduct. So they called me to do it, which was great. But I'm always interested because I know composers who can conduct very well, and I know composers who can't conduct very well. And some love to conduct, and others would rather be in the booth where, you're speaking with the engineer, and if the director is there, you're speaking with them, and, if it's a big expensive production, then there's producers, and it's important for them to be there sort of, fighting their own corner and making sure that everything goes the way. Do you prefer to conduct? Do you prefer to have your head in the orchestra where you can hear the sounds you've written, or prefer to be in the booth?
Sometimes I prefer to be in the booth because
I was hoping you'd say that.
No, because I have like this. I have the feeling of the complete sound. Being at the orchestra is more analytical. Sometimes is exciting. It's very exciting. And you have the musicians there, and but I'm more analytical and more precise if I'm in the booth. I can say really if I like or not. When I'm with the orchestra, sometimes I say I can do it better, or they can do it better, and sometimes I don't know if they can do better. So I'm not a good conductor for that, because I don't know how to do it better. Of course you do, and you can. And for me, it's more difficult to know where is the limit with the performing. But it's something that I like, but I recognize that I'm not very good.
A couple of years ago, I did a tour with the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra, and we played the final credits from Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, which wonderful sort of concert piece, makes a wonderful piece. And I was just wondering if you're like me, and maybe a lot of people here, that at the end of a film, you always stay to watch the credits roll so that you can hear the music, because I think you probably do this. It's a place where the composer can have a bit more freedom.
Yeah.
And maybe you want to sustain the whatever spell the movie has cast on the audience, but it's also a place where you can be a bit more elaborate. Is that how you approach the credit sequence?
Yeah, I think the credit sequence are very important, because it's the feeling of everything has happened, and gives you the possibility to put it in your head and in your memory. So it's something about saying to the audience, don't forget me. This was something important. It's what I was moved for the credit for that, not for my, I have now the orchestra, I have all the sound for me. Because I like when the sounds, when I'm working with the music, I like to know the other sounds, and I like when the orchestra is surrounded by traffic, for example. I think it's very interesting. The other day I was reading about Foster Wallace, this incredible writer, American writer, and he was a very good writer about tennis. People say that he's the best writer about tennis players. And he says that the thing he loves most is to play with wind. So it's something that all the tennis players hate, to play with wind, and he loved to play with wind. So I'm very conscious about the wind also, about the sound that is around the music. And I like to have the wind, to play with the sound of the doors, the sound of that, and I think I find very interesting. At the end, for the end titles, you are alone, but you have the responsibility to say to the audience, don't forget me. This is the film. This is life. It's life here.
And in this particular film, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, what was kind of the key for you? It wasn't an Almodóvar film. It was a wonderful director, but what gave you sort of the key to know how to approach this? Because it was your second Le Carré novel.
Yeah.
There was Constant Gardener,
Yeah.
also spy movie.
Yeah.
And so I mean, I was hugely impressed with it. I watched it again the other night, and it just, it's that kind of miserable British spy film, but there's, lovely, real meaning, especially in the music.
Yeah, it has a lot of details, but I have to recognize that when I came to London, they called me. I was in Andalusia, in the south of Spain, in holidays. So I didn't want to do the film. I want to be in holidays. And I read the screenplay, and I didn't understand nothing because of my English, and also because how difficult it was, or how complex, not difficult, but complex. I love complexity, but it was like a wall for me. So I came, and they showed me the film he prepared to show me the film on a big screen, but I said, no, this time I prefer to watch the film in a computer. We will go faster. And when I finished the film, I told to the director that I didn't understand nothing. And then Thomas, the director, reacted very intelligently and said, okay, it's a very good point to start. So you start from the beginning, and when you understand the film, the music understands the film, so the audience will understand the film. So I started from the beginning until the end, and when I arrived to the end, I understood the film. So I needed to compose the film to understand it. So I went very, and I make links with things. Of course, I had little time, but I had time to have a vision retrospective of the film and play with the repetition of the themes and make a structure that gives, I think, comprehension to the film, because my problem was comprehension, and but it was a very good experience. So starting from having from nowhere and going through the film to understand it.
What's next?
I don't know exactly. I'm prepared for the next year. I think I will work on 3 films in a complete year. And I'm working also in some music. I'm finishing a new version of coming from Pedro's film, The Skin I Live In, is a violin concerto.
Oh,
I wrote
wonderful.
it a first version. I'm writing now another version, and finishing also a cycle of songs, and so I'm trying to do this music at the same time with some new films. It was, well, of course, maybe I had listening at home the Third Symphony, Beethoven, but really something that touched me a lot was the music by Heitor Villa-Lobos, the Brazilian composer. I was playing the guitar, their pieces, their studios and preludes, and was very, for me, like a light that made me like a shock. The idea to invent music. And maybe it was Villa-Lobos, one of my first loves on music. Run by Kurosawa is one of my preferred. By Takemitsu. Yeah. I read, I don't know where, that Takemitsu went to the shooting on Run and was very impressed by the sound of the flags, and he went back to his studio with the sound of the flags and the sound of the horses, and I think it's a very good point to start a score.
That's his version of King Lear, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. When I was out in Japan, I met his daughter,
Yeah.
Takemitsu's daughter, and she told me a story about that film that Kurosawa first made Kagemusha, which was a more commercial film in Japan, and was able to raise all the money for the sets and the flags and the costumes and everything. And he used them again for Ran, so he didn't have to pay for them again. so he could make his King Lear.
Yeah.
But he wrote music for both films, Takemitsu.
Yeah. Now I'm very in love with Julieta, my last. Well, I did another work 2 months ago, but Julieta is one of my. I don't know. I love this score, but in Talk to Her also is one of my preferred scores, and I don't know. I don't have this. I'm waiting for the next. So I don't have a special one.
What about Julieta and Talk to Her makes them stand out for you? Is it that the music fits so well, or that you found your way into the film easily?
Yeah. I think I like how the music, not in itself, but how they play with the film, and how embodies the narration. But I can't explain what's the mechanism or the how I did it. I don't remember how exactly I did it, but it was I think intuition is very important to be, well, to everybody. And Almodóvar also was a master for me on that, to follow your feelings and to believe in inspiration. Like, inspiration is that something that happens because you are there, because you are very excited, and also because you are very constant on that. So it's you need that. So, and in those films have been very I can't say inspired, but trying to be inspired. Sometimes I read a script that I don't feel that I can do the music for that because, well, there is many possibilities, because it's very boring or not very, it's not exciting, and I have to spend a lot of time with that. So I have to really be in connection with that. But sometimes I say yes, I accept, and I don't know what to do on it. So it's very. I say, well, for example, now I'm involved in the next project. I can't tell you how is it, but I don't know what to do it. And probably is, for me, at the end, is very exciting that. So that puts me in the beginning again, to trying to discover one chord, then another, or a melody or a rhythm that. So I start doing very, very little ideas and jumping from there to the general shape.
And do you usually expect to feel that you get it and you say, this is interesting, I don't know how to start?
Well, it happens to me always that I have a lot of doubts about, especially in the beginning of the things, because I show like 5 different ways or more than how to do it, or sometimes I don't see how to do it, but sometimes I have to in the case that I can make these decisions with the directors, is for me is much better. So the best for a composer is to have a very good relationship with the director, because he's your friend, and is not if he says not, I think this is not good. Sometimes it's very difficult to accept this not negative thing, but if the director is good, is a good director, he has an intuition about what is good for his film, and you have to, in a way, to follow his ideas or his approaches. So it's more or less like this. I think it's very interesting, and I worked in a lot of films that they have a pre-existent music that influenced me for my score. I remember once in Pedro's, it was a song, but it happened several times with Pedro in films that he has, before the shooting, a song, and he was the song there, and my music comes after the song, as part of the song. So not trying to make a conversation also with the song, trying to make, so if the director puts Elgar on the score, probably on the film, my music will be after this Elgar. So you can't consider this music as something from other world. The best is to include and put yourself in this inclusion of this music. There are directors that have, for some moments, a very precise idea, and you have to respect that and start from this point. For example, I had with Julio Medem, he gave me the idea why about the valse, the waltz idea. Maybe you can start from this point, and it was a very good idea. It was from Lucia and the Sex, and so directors can give you incredible ideas, and it's very good to be open to follow. If you are against these ideas, you have to say, or to experiment other ideas, and sometimes you can convince them about the other possibility. But the directors have been living on this film much more time than you when the composer arrives to the film. So it's good to follow or to be under this guide. I think I don't know, I'm very irregular. I have very good days and very bad days. So on the good days I write very fast, and I think the music is very good, and on the bad days I feel the music is shit. But I try to be to stay every day with the music, waiting for the best moment to do it, and that gives you this idea of order. Helps me a lot. So I don't drink or I don't take drugs for writing, because I need an idea of order, I have to say, and to arrive to the disorder, but for a very good, a very stable way, or a very intelligent way. I'm not so regular, but now is maybe because I'm now 60. I don't write by night. I start very early in the morning, and now I love to write in the morning. Well, it's not my problem. There are things that I don't like, but I don't want to. I'm not against a style or I'm very peaceful. I don't want to have enemies, or I prefer to, I don't know, and I have a lot of friends, not a lot, but I have good friends that are very good composers and really good. So I have more admiration than hate for other music.
Well, it's lovely. Listen, thank you so much for being here tonight and sharing all this thoughts and your experience. I'm sure you'll all join me in thanking
Thank
Alberto.
you. Thank you. Let me Let me say thank you to the British Film Institute for this invitation. I really feel really good here. It's a beautiful space. And to my friend Robert, thank you so much for this
Pleasure.
good moment.
Great.
And to you.
And thank you all. Thank you all for coming.